My mother left me dying in the ER for a spa day. I am busy. If she dies, call me. 20 days later, I awoke to a new legal guardian. When I was 18, I was involved in a terrible accident on Interstate 45 while returning home from a large Easter family celebration in Charleston. According to the doctor, I would not survive if I did not have emergency surgery within an hour. That afternoon, my mother and my younger sister were at a fancy spa. My mother said, "If she doesn't pull through, just let me know later. We're in the middle of a treatment, and I'm not signing anything right now." When the hospital put her on speaker. I'm Maya Johnson, and I'm currently 21 years old. When I eventually opened my eyes 20 days later, the chart at the foot of my bed had been subtly modified. My mother was no longer identified as my legal guardian. Instead, there was another person's name. If you want to know exactly who stepped up when my own mother left, hit the subscribe button. The story only gets more bizarre from here. The new guardian's words were, "If you've ever watched the people who are supposed to love you the most turn their backs the second you needed them, drop the words." I've seen it in the comments, so I know I'm not the only one. Allow me to take you back to the beginning. Just outside of Charleston, on James Island, I grew up in a large white mansion. I was 8 when my father passed away from leukemia. He was teaching me how to ride a bike in the driveway one week, and then he was gone. Only my mom's father, John Marshall, continued to attend every weekend after the funeral. He was the former police chief who never truly retired, and everyone in the county knew him. He just exchanged the insignia for a porch swing and a fishing rod. I would sit in the front seat while he told me stories of pursuing bootleggers down rural roads. He would pull up in his old Ford truck, bring me shrimp and grits from his favorite location on Shem Creek. He wasn't Grandpa John to me. Grandpa, the only adult who never canceled, was just Grandpa. For over a year, my mother, Rebecca Turner, was in mourning. Then, at a downtown charity event, she ran into Ethan Cooper. Ethan drove a black Range Rover that always smelled like fresh leather and owned half of the new building on Qley Island. I hardly recall the beachside ceremony where they were wedded 2 years later. Lily, who was blonde, boisterous, and immediately the focus of the universe, arrived 9 months later. The house suddenly had a nanny, a nursery, and a whole new set of regulations. In order to give Lily the larger room with the balcony, my bedroom was moved to the back corner over the garage. My soccer medals vanished into crates. Instead of calling me by name, my mother began referring to me as my older daughter, as if I were an extra in someone else's family portrait. When I turned 14, I was essentially unnoticeable. Ethan never gave me a glance until I was in his path, yet he paid for everything. Every season Lily received new outfits. I was given uniforms from a private school that I never even went to. Grandpa's modest brick home in West Ashley, which is 30 minutes across the Ravenel Bridge, was the only place I still felt wanted. He kept the freezer full of popsicles, stored my old bike in his garage, and never once inquired as to why I spent every weekend I had spare time there. When I was 18, Easter weekend was meant to be different. Grandpa hosted his yearly barbecue. Deviled eggs, sweet tea in mason jars, low country boil, and 3 long tables beneath the live oaks. Flying in were cousins I hadn't seen in years. Children were running around, there was music, and the air smelled of charcoal. Grandpa said the pale yellow sundress he got me the previous month matched my eyes, so I wore it. It was almost like the good old days for a few hours, as if I might still fit in somewhere. Then, by the dessert table, I heard my mother talking on the phone. Telling someone that she and Lily had scheduled a mother-daughter spa day for the next morning, she laughed. Massages, facials, the full thing. The 3 of them, her, Ethan, and Lily, were then on a plane to the Bahamas for spring break. My name was mentioned. I felt a plate of banana pudding grow chilly in my palms as I stood there. I informed Grandpa that I had to go early because I had a headache. He made an effort to argue, but I could tell he was having trouble. But all I wanted was to get out. After helping me purchase a 2002 Jeep Wrangler with my summer lifeguard funds, he gave me the keys. I said, "Drive careful, baby girl, text me when you get there." By the time I reached I-45 westbound, it was already becoming dark. As they do under the low country skies, a spring rolled in quickly, became green, with sheets of rain falling. Even with the windshield wipers operating at full speed, the battle is still lost. Traffic became sluggish. To stay awake, I turned up the radio. Grandpa had a favorite old country tune. Headlights merged into red and white striations. And it wasn't until it was too late that I noticed the tractor trailer. At least 60 miles per hour, the driver jackknifed across 3 lanes, hydroplaned, and crashed into the driver's side of my Jeep. Metal let out a cry. The glass burst. The planet fell to a stop upside down against the median after flipping twice and ceiling caving in. I recall the crash's abrupt quiet, the taste of blood, the seatbelt slicing into my shoulder, and then nothing at all. I heard sirens yelling at me from a distance. The MUSC emergency room was a complete mess. Codes were screamed by doctors. The monitors cried out. For more O negative, someone continued shouting. I was immediately wheeled into Trauma Bay 1. In a matter of seconds, my clothing were severed. I had tubes down my neck and needles in both arms. My pelvis was shattered, spleen ruptured, bleeding inside my skull, and I had less than an hour before things went irreversible, a surgeon in blood-stained scrubs stated, leaning over me. They needed parental consent to take me to the O right now. A compassionate nurse took my phone, navigated to Mom, and pressed FaceTime. On the third ring, the call was connected. I could hear the soft hum of massage chairs and spa music. With cucumber slices covering her eyes and the sheet mask still on, my mother's face materialized. With her earbuds in, Lily was spread out on the table next to her, surfing through TikTok. Mrs. Cooper, this is Alvarez from MUSC Trauma, she began, tilting the camera so Rebecca could see the ventilator tube and my blood-covered face. Your daughter has been in a severe accident. She has life-threatening injuries and requires immediate surgery. We need verbal consent now or she may not survive the next hour. Squinting at the television, Rebecca pulled off a slice of cucumber. Lily leaned over to have a look and took out an earpiece. The physician intervened. Rebecca sighed as if someone had just asked her to move her car. Ma'am, we're looking at multiple fractures, internal bleeding, possible brain swelling. We have to open her up immediately. If she doesn't make it, just give me a call when it's over, she replied in a monotone voice. Lily laughed sharply, stopped talking, and took a snapshot of my bruised face on the gurney. We're in the middle of a treatment and I'm not driving all the way downtown to sign papers. Her thumbs flew over the screen as I watched. I would later find out that the caption she sent to her group chat was a welcome change of pace. The phone was shaking in the nurse's palm. The nurse tried again, and a doctor behind her mumbled, Jesus Christ. Another whispered, get that recorded, ma'am. This is a legal requirement for a minor. I heard you, Rebecca cut in. Call my father, John Marshall. He'll handle it. We paid for a full day here. She ended the conversation. The trauma team gazed at the screen that was blank. One of the residents appeared to be about to hurl the phone across the room. Grandpa was the next emergency contact they scrolled to. When the hospital arrived, he was already driving his old Ford pickup. He had been cleaning shrimp for dinner tomorrow while sitting on his patio. Still wearing rubber boots and an apron smeared with fish blood, he dropped everything and floored it across the Ashley River Bridge as soon as he heard Maya and Critical. The rain beat down on the windshield. The sky was illuminated by lightning. In 20 minutes, he completed the 30-minute drive. Wet to the bone, with his 32-year-old badge still fastened to his belt out of habit, he bounded through the emergency room doors. After giving the retiring chief a quick glance, the charge nurse waved him through. His hand trembled so much that the pen scratched the paper as he signed each consent document they thrust in front of him without even reading a line. He was allowed to stay in the bay long enough to see me, with tubes all over the place and a face so bloated that it was unrecognizable. The same phrase he used to say to me when I had nightmares as a child was uttered by him as he leaned near to my ear. They hurried me to the operating room after saying, I've got you, baby girl. Grandpa's right here. Outside the operating room, he dragged a metal chair up to the glass wall and took a seat. For the following 10 hours he remained still. Not when coffee was provided by the nurses. When the waiting room was empty. No. Not when the backup generators started up and the power was cut off for 14 minutes due to the storm outside. Just before dawn, he accompanied the bed as they rolled me to the intensive care unit, still clutching the same icy hand that had gone slack hours before. The next 20 days turned out to be Grandpa's longest. The ICU smelled of fear and antiseptic. The rhythm of the machine's hissing and beeping made it impossible to forget how thin the line was. Grandpa refused to get out of the vinyl recliner next to my bed. On the first night, nurses attempted to send him home. No one argued once he simply handed them the old badge that was still in his wallet and declared, I'm not going anywhere. He slept with his boots on, his head tilted back, and his mouth wide for 30 minutes at a time. In order to avoid being drowned out by the monitors, he spoke to me quietly and continuously when he woke up. He told me about the night I was born and how, because my mother was too tired, he held me first. He recounted how I screamed until he allowed me to reel it in myself, and how we caught a 6-foot shark off Folly Beach Pier when I was 8 years old. From the battered edition of To Kill a Mockingbird, he read aloud. He performed all the voices while keeping it in the truck. On certain nights he would just hum the ancient hymn that his own mother used to sing when he was a child, and that always put me to sleep on his couch. Physicians came and went. My brain swelled less, the neurologist said one morning. The orthopedic physician cautioned that the pelvis might never mend properly one more afternoon. Grandpa listened, nodded, and asked pointed questions that made the locals perspire before returning to holding my hand as if nothing had changed. The numbers eventually began to move in the correct direction on day 18. My blood pressure became stable. The ventilator's settings fell. Grandpa was seen grinning by a nurse for the first time in 3 weeks. A tall man in a navy suit showed up at the glass door that same day as he leaned in and whispered that the redfish were rushing and we would go fishing as soon as I woke up. 28 years ago, Mr. Donovan had worked cases with Grandpa. Once a month they continued to play poker. Grandpa glanced up at Donovan's folder and nodded slowly. Words are not necessary. After leaving the hospital, Donovan hopped in his silver Lexus and headed directly to James Island. He had memorized the address. In the entryway, surrounded by high-end baggage, stood Rebecca and Lily. With their tags already on, 2 identical pink luggage were waiting by the door for a 7-night Royal Caribbean cruise that would depart Charleston Harbor early the following day. Ethan was on a work call upstairs. For Instagram, Lily was recording herself spinning about in a brand new sundress. Rebecca was going over passports again. The doorbell rang. After introducing himself, Donovan gave Rebecca the large envelope and watched as she tore it open. 2 sets of papers were within. A civil claim brought by the hospital for extraordinary life-saving costs plus pain and suffering, as well as an emergency petition to revoke parental rights for medical neglect of a minor. Lily, who was 14 at the time and had actively engaged in the rejection, was also called Rebecca Turner. The spray tan turned Rebecca's face white. Mid-spin, Lily stopped recording. "You have 80 hours to respond," Donovan stated in a composed tone. Rebecca began to rant about attorneys, blunders, and how dare anyone question her parenting, saying, "After that, the judge has already agreed to an emergency hearing." Lily broke down in tears, saying the texts had no meaning for her. Donovan just turned and headed back to his vehicle. Rebecca gripped the papers as she slid down the wall of the home, mascara streaming down her face in black streams. Lily would not stop yelling that her spring break will be ruined. After coming downstairs and glancing at the papers, Ethan turned pale. Grandpa never spoke of the guest back at the hospital. Humming the same old hymn, he continued to grasp my hand while he waited for my eyes to open. I opened my eyes for the first time 3 days later. Everything was painful. I tasted plastic and metal in my mouth. The machines continued to beep, but now they did so more softly. Grandpa's red-rimmed, unshaven eyes were the first face I saw, and they were smiling. His cheeks were so big that I believed they might split. "Hey, baby girl," he said in a crackly murmur. "Welcome back," I attempted to say. A rasp was the only sound that emerged. Before he raised the whiteboard at the foot of the bed for me to read, he hit the call button. "Legal guardian John Marshall," was written in large, bold characters in black marker, and I looked until the words became hazy. Tears rolled into my ears from the side. With a thumb that still had a subtle shrimp and salt air scent, he wiped them away. He told me everything over the following few hours while physicians shone lights in my eyes and nurses checked vital signs. My mother used the exact phrase, "the FaceTime call." Lily's screen grab. I lay unconscious while the paper served. He didn't sugarcoat anything. He didn't. I sobbed once more intensely this time. Not from suffering, but from such profound relief that it was like drowning in reverse. They allowed me to return home after 3 weeks. Grandpa's small gray home on stilts on Folly Beach, 20 minutes south of the city, is the destination, not James Island. The moment he carried me over the threshold, the sea air filled my lungs. His fishing tackle room used to be my new bedroom. He had hung the identical wind chimes we had crafted when I was 9 years old and painted the walls a light blue. I could see the ocean rolling steadily and endlessly beyond the window. The next Monday, physical therapy began. Grandpa saw me like I was 2 years old again as I learned to sit up, stand, and finally shuffle behind a walker. Because shrimp and grits were soft enough for my wired jaw, he prepared them every night. With his arm around my shoulders, we sat on the porch swing and watched the sunset. There was no need for any of us to break the silence. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter one day. Mom appeared on the screen. I gazed at it for 12 rings. Grandpa remained silent as he observed from the doorway. I hit the decline button, put the phone down, and returned to the porch. She never tried again after that. The same week, Ethan filed for divorce across town. The Port Authority had recently awarded his company a huge contract. He didn't need to be associated with child-abandoning headlines. Taking only his clothing and the golf clubs, he left the house on James Island before the ink dried. After losing her mind on social media for around 4 days, Lily became completely silent as scholarship offers from colleges began to come in. Grandpa didn't mention it until I asked him. He gave me a direct response when I did. They made their choice, Ren. Now we make ours. On several nights, I woke up screaming from the anguish. Wearing old police academy sweat, he would stumble in, sit on the edge of the bed, and hold my hand until the medication took effect. On other evenings, I woke up to the sound of him praying aloud in the living room in a harsh voice, pleading with God to grant him enough years to see me completely restored. I was able to walk the entire length of the pier without stopping once the stitches were removed, and the casts were replaced with braces. Grandpa purchased a bucket of shrimp and 2 rods. We sat where the water becomes deep green, and although the lines in the water didn't catch much, we didn't care. The rest of the hospital odor was burnt off my skin by the sun. One evening when the wind blew my hair across my face, I glanced out to the horizon and knew I had stopped waiting for anything. No second opportunity, no explanation, no apologies. I had no desire to give. As usual, the ocean continued to move. The day of the preliminary hearing came a few months later. The Broad Street courthouse smelled of floor polish and old wood. Grandpa on one side and Donovan on the other. I entered using crutches. In a navy suit that was 2 sizes too big, my mother sat at the defendant's table without makeup and with puffed eyes. Beside her, Lily slouched in a blazer from a private school and gazed at the ground. The judge was a steel gray-haired woman who had no patience. After adjusting her glasses, she instructed the bailiff to roll the tape. The large screen displayed the FaceTime conversation. On the gurney, my fractured body. The background music is spa music. My mom's voice was chilly and clear. If she doesn't make it, just call me when it's over. The laughter of Lily. The screen grab. Showed my face covered in blood, along with her caption. There was complete silence in the courtroom. In fact, a juror in the rear gasped. Next, Donovan placed the phone logs on the bench. Within 5 minutes, Lily had sent the picture to 8 other group chats. The judge's pen stopped flowing when one message said, "One less person stealing my spring break." She gave my mother a long, painful look. "Mrs. Turner," she uttered in an icy voice. In 28 years on this bench, I have never heard a parent speak about their child this way. While that child was fighting for her life, temporary full custody is immediately transferred to John Marshall, effective today. We'll see you back here for the permanent hearing. She struck the gavel with such force that it reverberated across the marble. Rebecca was let off from her position at the South Carolina State Credit Union 3 days later. Everyone who handles federal funding must undergo a background check. A minor who is medically neglected is automatically disqualified. Using a cardboard box, security let her out. The same week, Lily's full-ride academic scholarship at the College of Charleston was canceled. The admissions board pointed to behavior that was inconsistent with the school's principles. All of a sudden, the private high school that had always revered her began to murmur behind her back. The James Island home entered foreclosure within a month. The deed already had Ethan's name on it. In order to safeguard his assets, he had signed everything over. Off Savannah Highway, mother and daughter moved into a 2-bedroom apartment with a malfunctioning elevator and peeling paint. Lily's automobile was lost. To pay her rent, Rebecca found a night job at a supermarket shop stocking shelves. I began going to actual therapy in the interim. I was picked up by a van twice a week for outpatient physical rehabilitation at MUSC. I regained my ability to climb stairs, balance on a Bosu ball, and have faith in my own legs. Every single time, Grandpa took me to the car and waited in the lobby, reading the same 3 fishing magazines, until I emerged, trembling and sweaty. I saw Dr. Rivera, a trauma psychotherapist, on Thursdays. We discussed nightmares, anger, and the day I decided I would never want to hear my mother's voice again while sitting in a tiny lavender-scented office. Without ever grumbling about the heat, Grandpa waited in the truck with the windows down and the country station turned down. On other afternoons, when the agony in my hips became unbearable, I would sit on the back deck and feed the German Shepherd bits of bread. Grandpa and I would watch the tide go out while sipping 2 sweet teas. He never made an effort to calm my rage. He simply allowed me to sense it. I could use a cane instead of crutches by the end of the summer, and then the cane for nothing at all. Although I still had a little limp, the doctor predicted that it would mostly go away by the time I was 18. I went all the way to the end of Folly Pier and returned one evening without stopping. Despite the fact that the sun had not yet set, Grandpa met me halfway with a lantern and a blanket. We took off our shoes and relaxed on the sand, allowing the waves to lick our toes. My head was resting on his shoulder. I said, "Thank you for staying." He gave me a kiss on top of my head. Nowhere else I'd rather be, baby girl. The last trial day arrived 8 months after the crash. I entered the courtroom without a limp, crutches, or cane. My head was raised, but the scar on my forehead remained pink. In his Sunday suit, which he wore to my dad's burial, Grandpa sat directly behind me. With her hair tied back tightly and a tissue she never used in her hand, Rebecca appeared smaller than I remembered. Lily crossed her arms so tightly that her knuckles turned white as she gazed straight ahead. I was called to the stand first by Donovan. I sat down, swore, and met the judge's gaze. I inhaled. "Tell the court how it felt," he explained. "Knowing your mother refused to come while you were dying, the chamber awaited." "It felt like the last piece of me that still believed I mattered just died on that table," I stated. My voice remained steady. One sentence told me I was disposable. The same woman who used to read me bedtime stories was the one who said it. I informed them about seeing Grandpa's name on the Guardian line when I woke up. Regarding the one missed call that I never answered. Almost every night, rather of pondering why I wasn't enough, I dozed off while listening to the water. Rebecca's attorney attempted to portray her as anxious, overburdened, and a victim of her situation. He mentioned her divorce, foreclosure, and loss of employment. I never gave her a glance. The judge asked me if I had anything further to say once he was done. "Yes, Your Honor," was my response. "I don't want her money. I don't want her apologies. I just want this to be over." The judge didn't take long to say, "I already have a family." After 25 minutes she came back. Permanent termination of parental rights for Rebecca Turner effective immediately. Civil judgment in favor of the plaintiff and the hospital. $500,000. The James Island property will be sold at auction to satisfy the lien. Mr. John Marshall is granted full legal adoption. This case is closed. The gavel snapped like a gunshot. Questions were yelled by reporters in the hallway outside. Disregarding everyone, I grabbed Grandpa's arm and ventured out into the October sunshine. The large white mansion was padlocked by the bank 4 weeks later. What little Rebecca and Lily chose to keep was taken by a moving truck. They packed items into an ancient automobile and proceeded north on I-45 to a less expensive place where no one knew them. I never inquired as to where. The adoption documents came in the mail the same month. I wept more than the day I awoke from the coma when I signed Maya Marshall for the first time. My dad's old service photo is next to the certificate that Grandpa framed over the fireplace. 12 minutes from Folly Beach, I began my final year at an alternative school. No one knew the story unless I told them. The courses were small and the teachers genuinely cared. I received early decision admission to the College of Charleston, which is close enough for me to return home every night if I so desired, and I made the honor roll each quarter. It was windy and warm on graduation day. The pale blue gown and cap I wore matched the hue of the walls in my bedroom, which Grandpa had painted for me. Everyone in the senior class knew by that point who had gotten me through, so when they called my name, they all stood up and cheered. Grandpa was waiting in his dress uniform at the bottom of the stairs, his eyes bright and his medals polished. I sprinted over to him, wrapped my arms around his neck, and allowed him to hoist me off the ground as if I were still weightless. That Easter Sunday was 6 years ago. Now that I'm 21, I work as a family trauma counselor at a nonprofit organization in Mount Pleasant, with my psychology degree hanging on the wall. Teenagers who think no one will ever choose them sit across from me every day, and I get to tell them they're mistaken because someone picked me when the ones who were meant to love me the most turned their backs on me. Last month was Grandpa's 77th birthday. He continues to mow the yard by himself. Still produces the greatest shrimp and grits in the state and catches more fish than any charter boat skipper on the island. It's always half full in the house on stilts with its creaky coffee pot, singing porch swing, and wind chimes. It's still light blue in my previous room. Neither of us ever converted his tackle room back to a bedroom, so it remains that way. Most nights, we watch dolphins chasing mullet in the surf while we have dinner on the deck. He refers to me as baby girl, precisely once per day, usually while passing me a cup of sweet tea. I still refer to him as Grandpa. There's nothing else that seems right. 4 years ago, Rebecca and Lily permanently left South Carolina. When I last heard from them, they were renting a trailer under different last names someplace in Georgia. I never looked for them. They never looked for me. The quiet is pure. It's the end. There is peace. I get asked if I'm upset. I'm not. Anger consumes energy, which I have chosen to use for living. Some people inquire about my forgiveness. I don't have the right to forgive. They have the right to earn it, but they have never done so. I'm just finished. I do have such a profound sense of thankfulness that it still surprises me. Thank you to the man who spent 20 nights sleeping in a vinyl chair. For the retired chief who never skipped a counseling session. For the grandfather who made his heart a harbor and his house a home. Those who are your blood relatives are not your family. When your blood runs cold on an operating table, family is the one who stays with you. Family members are the ones that hold your hand, sign documents, and never once make you feel like a burden. You don't have that person, so try harder if you're watching this and feeling afraid. They exist. They can occasionally be the unexpected grandma you need. They can be the neighbor who won't go, the friend, or the teacher. And hang on when you find them. Therefore, true families are not created. It is selected each and every day, particularly on the days when it costs them everything to choose you. That is the only certain truth I am aware of. That concludes my tale.